Okay, welcome to your last assignment of this badge. Figuring out how to get your an object to move on the screen while you're pressing down a key, and then to stop when you're not pressing down a key. So, unlike many of these tips, I try to make the tips so that it's just reviewing some ideas but this one really involves some new ideas that you wouldn't have known if you haven't watched this. So I'm going to break it down into two parts. In this first part, we're going to deal with the key functions, and then the last part will be the actual movement part. So when you get done with this one, you're still not going to have movement, although maybe you could guess the next part by the time we're done. I'm starting here with a basic Code Sculptor piece, kind of like what we had in the past, where it just draws a circle, and in that circle it has a CX and a CY for the location of that circle. And down here we have our draw handler, and I've started the key down handler. It doesn't do anything right now. So if I was to just run the code, I'd be back to here with it not actually doing anything. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to create our basic key handler that listens for certain keys to be pressed. So here I'm going to use the up, down, left, and right arrow keys. And when I use those, it's usually easier to treat them as a part of the key map that Simple GUI has built into it. You could do find the ASCII values of those keys, and it would be a little bit of a simpler if statement, but that's, I don't know what those are, so I'm going to just use the key map to do this. What do I want to do with that? We'll determine in a minute. So let's go ahead and just create our four keys and what they're going to do. All right, and then just change them over here. So there's our four basic keys. So normally, we could say, if we said we want the CY to be affected directly, this is what we did in assignment 2, is that this one affects it directly, but then if the key is down, then it's going to make it move, and then it wouldn't work again until you left the key up and press it down again. And so you'd always be having to lift up your fingers. And so what we want instead is we want something that can persist while the key is down. So it's almost like a while statement. But if we created a while statement here inside key down, it would never get outside of this key. It would never actually get to the draw, right? It would get, if you think about it, a while statement will keep it in a loop, and it doesn't let it achieve the rest of the program. And so we would never get to the draw, so we would never see that we actually moved. So we can't quite do that. So we need some other way to kind of remember what direction we're going to move. So instead of, as soon as I say that, I want to remember something, well, I want to store a value somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some variable. I could call it move, I could call it direction. I mean, I could call it anything I want, but it's really kind of simple. I'm just going to make a direction, and I'm going to say, hey, when they press the up key, they want move to equal up. And that's all I'm going to do, really. And I could make these numbers instead, but using strings is nice and easy, and it helps me remember what is going on. So I'm just going to quickly do that. And then what I want to do is I want to say, but if they let go of this key, so if they release the key, and that would be a key up action, we don't want the move to equal up anymore. We want the move to equal basically nothing, or stop. So in order for that to happen, we now need a key up function, a key up handler, while before we only use key down. This time we have to use key up because we want something to change when the keys get lifted up. One other thing we might want to do before we move on to that is just make move a global variable so that we can change it in other functions other than key down, because we're going to change it in key up as well, which means up here I might as well say move equals nothing. Now what's funny about this is it's so easy to do. Maybe we'll do this part first. We're going to do down here, we have to say, oh yeah, by the way, there is also a key up handler. So if we forget to do this, it will never actually listen for the key up functions that we want to create. So now it's going to look for key up as something to pay attention to. So we have to create the key up definition. And what's interesting is I want it to be basically the exact same thing as key down. So I copy and paste that, and I change it to key up. And now I say, well, if the key that they are lifting up, that's as opposed to this word up, right? That's different. But if the key is getting lifted up or released, we now want move to no longer equal up. So we want it to equal nothing. And if they're no longer pressing the down key, we want the down to equal nothing. We want this one to equal nothing. We want this one to equal nothing. I will say one thing, which is this function is not going to allow diagonal movement, because it's only going to set, you can only be moving up, down, left, and right. There's no way for you to say, I'm moving up and left, because it's not saying like up plus left or anything like that. It's just one or the other. So whichever one you press first is the one that's going to take over. So if you want a diagonal movement, you'd have to actually change how you do this a little bit. Okay, but this is our two key handlers. Now, I run the program. It's nice to run it just to make sure that there's no errors. You can see that the key, like the last key I press, I'm pressing down W, and then I'm releasing W, so it says up W. I'm pressing down the up key right now, which is kind of strange that it says T. I don't know why it says that. Oh, I see. It's an arrow. You just can't quite see the arrow. I'm pressing down the right key. I've just released the right key. So in a minute, these are going to actually do something in part 2. If you want to take a guess, here's what you want to do. You want to make a function that is going to change move. So, if move is up, then something's going to happen, and if move is down, something's going to happen. So you can think about how that would work. If you can't, if your brain's not working right now, you can just go ahead and watch the next video.